Good morning, my student ID is BP0325427, and this is my technology management project from quantum risk to quantum readiness, strategic post quantum cryptography migration framework for a large UK retail bank. For the next 15 minutes, I'll set out the problem, how I researched and structured the project, what my analysis found, and the prioritized recommendations I'm making. Throughout, I refer the bank by the pseudonym Meridian for confidentiality, but it represents a large regulated UK retail and commercial bank. Let's start with why this matters. Meridian, like every modern bank, runs on cryptography, online and mobile banking, payments, digital identity, and stored customer data are all protected by RSA and a split curve algorithm. The problem is that those are exactly the algorithms a further computer is expected to break. And this isn't science fiction. The 2024 Quantum Threat Timeline report by Mosca and Penny puts the probability of code banking quantum computer with 10 years and between 19 and 30%. The UK's National Cybersecurity Center has 2035 as the deadline for completing migration to quantum cryptography and the size stakes. The average data breach is financial service now costs $5.5 million. That before regulatory fines so that it is readable replacement standards already exist and regulatory clock started. The most urgent part of this is what called harvest now and decrypt later. Advisories can capture encryption data today and simply store it. The decryption it once quantum computer becomes available for a bank that's serious because mortgage payments and identity records have to stay confidential for 15 to 25 years. So data become harvested right now is already at risk. There is a neat way to reason about this Moscow's inequality. If the time your data must stay X plus the time it is taking you to migrate Y is greater than the time until the quantum computer arrives Z, then you are already exposed. Put consecutive numbers in. Secrecy of around 20 years, migration of 5 to 8 years, that's 25 to 28 years of exposure, which already exceeds the lower estimation for quantum computer. The inequality is breached now. The core problem I identified in the Meridian has no structured organization-wide risk-based framework and crucially no cryptographic inventory makes this transaction. So the defined aim to evaluate Meridian's exposure and develop prioritized evidence-based and governance drive migration approach alliances to NCSC milestones that keeps bank running while it changes. I broke into five smart objectives. First, analyze the threat and using authoritative evidence. Second, apply the established strategy frameworks, Crystal SWOT, FOTA, and Balances scorecard to diagnosis readiness. Third, define a phased risk-based framework mapped to the 2028, 2031, and 2035 dates. Further, produce prioritized recommendations tested with impact, feasibility, and cost benefit. And fifth, specific project management and governance After Effects needs to deliver the sustain it. On method, this was a desk-based secondary research project with a parametric stance. I made that choice deliberately as that relevant evidence already exists in the public domain. So collecting new primary data would have been disappropriate. The value comes from selecting and critically evaluating high-quality sources. I triangulated three categories. First, authoritative standards and government guidance. Next, the NCSC, ENISA, which gives the technical regulatory baselines and are highly credible. Second, peer-reviewed and seminal academic literature, Shore, Mosca, Algae, which gives theoretical depth but can date quickly in a fast-moving field. And third, industry and sector evidence. Europol, the Federal Reserve, IBM guarantee, which makes market and cost context, but which I treated casually and used only to corroborate because of potential commercial biases. Every source was assigned for authority, currency, objective, relevant, and I cross-checked the key numbers across independent sources. For the project itself, I deliberately layered theory, framework, project discipline rather than relying on single lens. The backbone is PMBOK as a hybrid life cycle, a productive waterfall structure for regulator sequences phases combined with a agile ploys for the hybrid cryptography testing, where standards and vendors support are still maturing. I choose PMBOK over Prince2 and over fully algae method deliberately. Prince2 stage gates suit the regulated phase but are heavy for exploratory ploys. Pure algae could not produce the audible milestones evidence regulator because the framework to the adopted by the engineers and accepted by the business. I drew on the technology acceptance model and Rogers. Diffusion of innovation plotting with the cable early adopters and demonstrating clear advantage for the organization changes. Quarters 8-step model creates urgency from the 2035 deadlines and anchors cryptology into the development life cycle with Louis framing the culture shift. And I used Mendel's power index matrix with a RACI chart to map stakeholder and assign accountability. The Jane chart shows how that comes together as a delivery plan, a 24-month program structure sequenced to the NCSC milestones. It begins with initiation, governance, setup, critically cryptography discovery, the risk-based scale deployment to the high-risk services, and financially optimizes and governance maturity. The single most important dependency is discovery must come before prioritization. You can't sequence what you can see. The long-lived high-risk data is migrated first and leave risk registered governance delivery and feeds abroad reporting. The milestones marks inventory and plans, high-risk flows plotted and migration completed map directly onto the regulators 2028, 2031, 2035 dates. Now the analysis. A pestle scan shows external pressure conveying from very direction. Politically and legally, there is the NCSC deadline plus DORA, NIS2, and PCI $1 million breach figure. Socially, it's customer trust and digital identification technologically. The standards are mature, harvest now, decrypt later is active, and the quantum hardware is accelerating the sword that turns the lens inward. Meridian has real strengths, capital, a mature security function, existing identity platforms, and genuine opportunities, including a first mover advantage in demonstrable trust. But there is one decisive weakness that under, undercuts all of it. No cryptography inventory and very low cryptography allocated and the threads data losses through harvesting vendor login and missing the regulatory milestones are exactly what that weakness exposes bank to. And here is the central insight that ties the framework together. The binding constraints is visibility and allocating, not algorithms. The replacement standards already exist. The obstacle is the bank can't currently see priorities or rapidly change its cryptography. The reframers, the whole thing post quantum migration isn't really a technical upgrade, it's an enterprise's capability problem. And that's precisely why discovered and cryptography already have to come first applying Proto briefly. Digital trust is becoming a competitive differentiation, so demonstrable quantum readiness is more than compliance. It's an advantage. And make success measurable. I used a balanced scorecard financially spent against avoid losses for customer no service degradation for the internal process a full inventory by 2008 2028 and for learning and growth teams certified in cryptography already. This gives leadership and dashboard track progress. That leads to the three prioritized recommendations. Recommendations one, and that is the quick win, high impact, and high feasibility, is to establish cryptography inventory and cryptography already capability now. Automatic discovery, a central registration algorithms, keys, and certify abstracting cryptography behind algae interfaces. It's the request for everything else. and it satisfies the 2028 milestone. Recommendations 2 is to strategic phase 1, deploying hybrid cryptography classes plus post quantum on the highest risk, long lived flaws, things like TLS, VPNs, payments, and identity sequences by Moscow logic. Hybrid keeps everything interoperable with standards and partners mature. Recommendations 3 is the variable, a permanent cryptographic governance function that embraces cryptography into the development life cycle and for mandating quantum-ready vendor route mapping. This impact feasibilities matrix on the right shows why I have sequenced them this way. R1 and R3 are quick wins to start immediately, while R2 is highly but praised because its feasibility depends on vendor and standard maturity. Why this approach over alternatives on cost benefits? The early investment is bounded and it is far outweighed by avoiding losses of a breach of data that's already being harvested. On risk reward, acting early costs more rework and standard evolve. Acting late is larger and irreversible. I considered three alternatives and rejected each. Doing nothing forfeits the data being harvested today and misses 2025. Big Bang simultaneously replacement is operationally reckless, give how tightly coupled the estate is and how immature vendor support still the quantum key distribution is. Costly hardware dependent and limited. The NCSC doesn't recommend it for general use, so the recommendations option is phased hybrid governance led framework. It risk based. It's allocate the regulatory dates. It preserves continuity and it's affordable and hedged. To conclude, three take To conclude, three takeaways. First, there is a credible and time bound. The standard exists, the deadline is set, and the harvesting is happening now. Second, the binding constraints is visible and allocating. No algorithms, which is why discovery comes first. And the third answer is phased, hedged, and governed framework. Inventory and crypto allocating the hybrid post quantum cryptography on the risk flows sustained by a permanent governance function. The strategic message is simple by acting early and in the governed way, Meridian turns an unavoidable regulatory obligations into genuine source of reliance and competitive trust. Thank you for watching the full analysis, the complete project management after effect, and the full harvested references list in the accompanying report. I am happy to take the questions.